Welcome to the Deep Dive Podcast, brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC. Subscribe and read our blogs at x9intel.com for more insightful deep dives.
Thanks for having me.
We're just 2 days away from 2025, can you believe it? And all these predictions about the future of work are rolling in.
It's definitely exciting and a little bit overwhelming to think about all the changes that might be coming.
Yeah. It feels like we're on the verge of some pretty major shifts, especially with the rise of AI.
Right. And it's interesting how quickly the conversation has shifted from generative AI, like ChatGPT, to the potential rise of AI agents.
Okay, so let's break this down for our listeners. What exactly are AI agents, and how are they different from the generative AI tools that we're already using?
Well, you can think of generative AI as your super smart assistant. It can create text, write code, even compose music, but it's still taking directions from you.
Right.
An AI agent, on the other hand, is more like a digital employee. It can not only understand your goals, but actually take action to achieve them, often with very little human intervention.
So it's not just about generating content, it's about actually getting things done.
Exactly. It's about action.
Is that what ServiceNow is talking about when they predict that AI agents will be adopted even faster than generative AI?
Yes, I think that's a big part of it. Chris Beatty, ServiceNow's chief customer officer, believes AI agents will have a much bigger impact on businesses.
Why is that?
Well, generative AI has been focused on tasks, things like summarizing documents or generating images.
I see.
AI agents will be about automating entire workflows instead of just pieces of them.
Wow, that's a pretty bold prediction.
It is.
So if we're talking about AI agents automating entire workflows, does that mean we're all going to be out of a job by next week?
Well, maybe not next week, but it definitely raises questions about the future of work. Some experts, like Geoffrey Hinton, who's considered the godfather of AI, argue that we'll need a universal basic income, or UBI, to address AI's impact on the job market.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What exactly is UBI?
Essentially, it's a guaranteed income provided by the government to every citizen, regardless of whether they have a job or not.
So everyone would just get a paycheck no matter what.
And that's the basic idea. The thinking is that as AI takes over more tasks and potentially displaces workers, UBI could provide a financial safety net for everyone.
That's a pretty radical idea. What are some of the arguments for and against something like that?
Well, Hinton believes that AI will increase productivity and create a lot of wealth, but those gains might not be distributed evenly.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
So he sees UBI as a way to help ensure that everyone benefits from these advancements, not just a select few.
I see. So it's about fairness and equity.
Exactly. However, there are other experts like Dario Amodei, the CEO of AI startup Anthropic, who believe that UBI might not be enough.
Really?
Yeah, they think AI could cause such a massive disruption to the job market that we might need even more radical solutions like social wealth funds or job guarantees.
So on one hand, you have the potential for AI to create wealth and free us from certain types of work. But on the other hand, there's the concern about job displacement and how to ensure everyone benefits from this shift. It's a lot to consider.
It really is. And it's not just about the economics of it all. There are also social and psychological implications to consider.
Like what?
Well, if we no longer have to work to survive, how does that change our sense of purpose and identity? What motivates us to get up in the morning?
You're right. That's a huge question.
And a recent study backed by OpenAI CEO Sam Altman explored this by giving 1,000 people $1,000 per month for 3 years just to see what they would do.
Interesting. So like a real-world UBI experiment. What did they find?
Well, the study found that rather than working less, many participants chose lower-paying jobs that offered more independence or opportunities for growth.
So they weren't just sitting around doing nothing.
Not at all. They were still working, but they were choosing work that was more meaningful to them.
I can see that. It's like, if you're not worried about making ends meet, you have the freedom to pursue work that you're passionate about, even if it doesn't pay a ton of money.
Exactly. And that suggests that UBI could actually empower people to pursue work they find meaningful rather than simply working out of necessity.
It's a really interesting finding. I've always been curious about what I'd do if I didn't have to work for money. I think I'd spend a lot of time traveling, seeing the world. Maybe I'd finally write that novel I've been dreaming about.
It's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it? To imagine a life where you're free to pursue your passions and interests without the constraints of financial pressure.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But let's bring this back to the here and now. We've got all these predictions about the rise of AI agents in 2025, which is literally just around the corner.
Yeah, it's happening fast.
And Salesforce even predicts that AI agents will be collaborating with each other, forming multi-agent systems to tackle complex business problems.
Yeah, they believe these multi-agent systems will be able to manage entire campaigns, make decisions, and solve problems across different departments.
So we're not just talking about automating individual tasks anymore. It's about AI working in teams to manage entire business processes.
Right. It's a whole other level of complexity and sophistication.
So how do you see this playing out in the workplace? I mean, what will it actually be like to work alongside these AI agents?
That's the big question, isn't it? And according to LinkedIn's Anish Raman, AI will actually empower entry-level workers to take on higher impact work.
Oh, interesting. So instead of replacing jobs, it's actually upskilling the workforce.
Exactly. Imagine if AI could handle all those repetitive manual tasks that currently fill entry-level jobs. This would free up human workers to focus on more strategic and creative tasks.
That makes a lot of sense. So instead of replacing humans, AI could actually help us develop new skills and take on more challenging work.
Exactly. And this shift will also have a significant impact on the role of managers. LinkedIn predicts that managers will need to become more like coaches, guiding and supporting their teams as they navigate this new world of work.
So the focus will shift from managing tasks to managing people.
That's right. And that aligns with leadership expert Edith Cooper's prediction that human-centric leadership skills will be in high demand.
What kind of skills are we talking about?
Skills like communication, empathy, and inclusivity. These will become even more crucial as workplaces become more automated.
It seems like in a world where AI is handling more of the technical tasks, the human skills, the ability to connect with and understand others will become even more valuable.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the whole debate around remote work.
Oh, right, because if AI can do so much remotely, does it even matter where the human workers are?
Exactly. Will companies be able to attract and retain top talent if they insist on a full return to the office, especially in fields like AI where demand is so high?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Stanford economist Nicholas Bloom seems to think this will be a major point of contention in 2025. He calls it the year of the duck.
Year of the duck.
Yeah, calm on the surface, but a flurry of activity underneath. He predicts a lot of pushback from employees against 5-day-a-week return-to-office mandates.
And a lot of ducks on Zoom calls, I imagine.
Yeah, maybe, haha. But seriously, he believes that companies demanding a full return to the office could see a heavy exodus of top talent, particularly in fields like AI.
So it sounds like there's a potential power shift happening. If companies want to stay competitive, they might need to be more flexible about where and how their employees work.
It's definitely something to watch, and it highlights the importance of adapting to the changing dynamics of the workplace.
All of this is so incredibly fascinating. It feels like we're on the verge of a major societal shift, and it's both exciting and a little daunting.
I agree. There's a lot to be optimistic about, but also a lot of potential pitfalls to avoid.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations are so important.
Absolutely. We need to be thinking critically about these issues and making informed choices about the kind of future we want to create.
Well said. And speaking of choices, we have a lot more predictions to unpack, including some potential downsides to this AI-driven future. But before we do that, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the Deep Dive podcast and check out our blog at x9intel.com for more insights on AI, the future of work, and much more.
We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into the future of work. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive podcast, brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC.
So before we went to the, I guess not a break, before we shifted gears there, we were talking about how AI agents could really kind of reshape the workplace. But like with any new technology, there are always potential downsides.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about those.
Yeah, absolutely.
No technology comes without its risks.
For sure.
And, we need to be aware of those as we move forward.
One thing that I was reading about that kind of caught my attention was the legal risks associated with AI models trained on copyrighted data.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Especially with these large language models that are trained on like massive amounts of data.
Right, and a lot of that data is copyrighted.
Right.
And so there's a lot of concern about, who owns that data, who has the right to use it, and how can we make sure that these models are being used ethically and legally.
Yeah, I saw that GitLab's CTO, Sabrina Farmer, is predicting an increase in lawsuits.
Oh, yeah.
Against companies providing these large language models.
Yeah, I think that's a very real possibility.
Yeah, like they're training these models on books, articles, code, all sorts of stuff that people have created and own the rights to.
Right, and then they're turning around and using those models to generate new content.
Yeah.
And so the question is, is that infringement?
Right.
I think it's a very gray area right now legally.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot more litigation in this area in the coming years.
Yeah. It seems like it's one of those things that the law and the ethics are kind of lagging behind the technology a little bit. Like we're developing this technology so quickly, and then we're kind of trying to figure out, okay, wait, what are the implications of this?
Right. How do we regulate this? How do we make sure that it's being used for good and not for harm?
Right.
And I think those are really important questions that we need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess for companies that are, thinking about adopting these AI solutions, I mean, what's your advice to them?
Well, I think the first thing is just to be aware of the risks.
Yeah.
Don't just blindly jump into this without really thinking through the potential implications.
Right.
Do your research, talk to experts, get legal advice.
Yeah.
Make sure that you understand the risks before you start using these models.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess for individuals, how do you see this impacting people's, daily lives?
Well, I think one of the biggest impacts is going to be on the way we work. As AI agents become more sophisticated, they're going to be able to automate more and more tasks.
Right.
And that means that some jobs are going to disappear.
Right.
But it also means that new jobs are going to be created.
Right.
And so I think it's really important for people to be thinking about, what skills are going to be in demand in the future, and how can I make sure that I'm prepared for those changes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, we've talked about, some of these potential downsides, but one of the predictions that I saw that I thought was both intriguing and a little bit unsettling was from an NYU professor, Anna Tavis.
Oh, yeah.
And she predicts a rise in personalized AI coaches, agents, and assistants. And it makes you wonder, how is that going to impact our relationships, our sense of self?
Right. I mean, on the one hand, it's kind of exciting, to think that you could have 247 access to this personalized support and guidance from an AI coach.
Yeah, you could have your own personal therapist, your own personal trainer, your own personal, financial advisor all rolled into one.
Right. But then on the other hand, it does raise those questions about, what happens to human connection.
Right.
If we're spending all of our time interacting with these AI agents, are we going to lose the ability to connect with other human beings in a meaningful way?
Yeah. And, there's also that question of, if you're getting all of your advice and guidance from an AI, I mean, are you really thinking for yourself?
Right. Are you just blindly following the AI's instructions?
Yeah.
And I think that's a real danger.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think we need to be very careful about not becoming too reliant on these AI agents.
Right.
Because I think there's a real risk that we could lose our sense of autonomy.
Right.
Our sense of agency.
Yeah.
If we're not careful.
Yeah, it's it's a double-edged sword, right?
Absolutely.
AI has the potential to enhance our lives in so many ways.
Yeah.
But we need to be mindful of the potential downsides.
Absolutely.
Make sure that we're using it in a way that benefits us.
Yeah.
And doesn't end up harming us in the long run.
Right. And I think that's where the human element comes in.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we're staying grounded in our values, our relationships, our sense of purpose.
Right.
Even as AI becomes increasingly integrated into our lives.
Right. It's not about, rejecting AI or being afraid of it.
Yeah.
It's about, figuring out how to use it in a way that enhances our lives and doesn't diminish them.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really important message.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings us back to this whole discussion about UBI and the potential for a world without work.
Right.
Because if AI is able to automate so many of the tasks that we currently do, I mean, how do we find meaning and purpose in a world where work is no longer a necessity?
Right. I mean, that's a question that a lot of people are wrestling with right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an easy answer. No.
But I do think it's a question that we need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think the answer is going to be different for everyone.
Right.
Some people might find meaning and purpose in creative pursuits.
Yeah.
Others might find it in community involvement. Others might find it in spending time with family and friends.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for each of us to figure out, what is it that gives my life meaning?
Right.
What is it that makes me feel fulfilled?
Right.
And then to start creating a life that is aligned with those values.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's where, this whole conversation about AI and the future of work becomes really interesting, because it's like, it's forcing us to confront these really fundamental questions about,
Right.
What does it mean to be human?
Uh-huh.
What is the purpose of life?
Right.
What do we want our society to look like?
Yeah.
And I think those are really important questions that we need to be having. Absolutely. And I think they're questions that we need to be having now.
Yeah.
Before it's too late.
Right.
Because the future is coming whether we're ready for it or not.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to be proactive in shaping that future.
Absolutely.
Rather than just letting it happen to us.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's where X9 Intelligence comes in.
Yeah.
We're trying to help people understand these changes and to make informed decisions about their future.
Right.
We're not here to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
But we are here to provide them with the information and the resources that they need to make their own choices.
Yeah, and to empower them to take control of their own future.
Exactly.
Yeah, and to kind of navigate this really complex and rapidly changing landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said. Well, we've talked about a lot of really, really interesting stuff today.
We have.
And I think we've just barely scratched the surface.
Right.
But unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Likewise.
And I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as well.
I hope so.
And I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Deep Dive podcast and check out our blog at x9intel.com for more insights on AI, the future of work, and much more.
Absolutely.
And until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
That's great advice. Welcome back to the Deep Dive podcast, brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC.
So we've really gone deep on this episode, haven't we? AI agents, the future of work, even like a world without work.
It's a lot to process.
It is. And we're like literally on the doorstep of 2025. This isn't just theory anymore.
It's right around the corner.
It's kind of mind-blowing. As we wrap up, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to walk away with?
I think it's this. We get to shape this future.
Okay, I like that. We're not just along for the ride.
Exactly. It's not about being passive. It's about making choices, building skills, having these conversations NW that shape what comes next.
So yeah, not being afraid, but being actively involved in creating the world we want.
Exactly. And that involves being honest about both the good and the bad that AI can bring.
Being critical thinkers, questioning everything.
Yes. Not just accepting every headline or promise at face value. We need to weigh the pros and cons, have those tough conversations, and then decide what kind of future we're building.
And that's where X9 Intelligence comes in, right? Helping people navigate this, because it's complex.
Absolutely. We're providing the insights, the research, so people can make informed decisions about their lives, their careers.
So someone listening right now may be feeling overwhelmed by all this AI talk. What advice would you give them?
Don't underestimate human connection. It's more valuable than ever.
As AI gets smarter, we need to double down on what makes us human.
Exactly. Nurture those relationships, the personal and the professional ones. They're your foundation.
Makes sense. And it's technology should make us better, not replace us, right?
100%. Second piece of advice, never stop learning.
Oh, that's huge in this environment. Things change so fast.
Exactly. Be curious, be open to new things. Skills that are hot today might be gone tomorrow, so that learning mindset is key.
And not just the tech stuff, right? We've talked about communication, critical thinking, problem solving, all that human stuff.
Those are the skills that set you apart when AI is doing the routine work. And finally, remember, the future isn't set in stone.
We're not just powerless watching it happen.
Right. It's like a blank canvas, and WE get to paint it. Be bold, be curious, be brave, and be kind. You create your own future.
That's a great way to end this. This has been the Deep Dive Podcast, brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC.
You can find us at x9intel.com.
Subscribe, read our blogs. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Thanks for listening.